Hey, Life Fixers, hope you're having an awesome day. Are you ready to better understand yourself, your partner, and your marriage? I am excited for today's guest. We are on for 1 million downloads per episode by the end of 2025. So if you like this episode, make sure to share it with your family and friends so you'll be helping us and them at the same time. Now, today's guest is a licensed marriage and family therapist, Sharon McCormick. I am so excited to be here speaking with you. You want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and exactly what you do?
Sure. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in Connecticut. Being a therapist is actually a second act for me. I was a data communication specialist for years in New York City. But when I got married and had children, I stayed home with them, but always knew that I would go back to school to get trained in some sort of psychology related field. That was what I majored in college. So I did. When my kids were young, I went back to school and I got a master's in marriage and family therapy. And I've been practicing for 11 years now. So even though people get confused when they hear marriage and family therapist, they think, you really just see couples. But I actually see individuals, couples, and families. I think I have the greatest job in the world. I think there is nothing more interesting than people and their relationships.
I'm in agreement with you on that one.
Okay. And I actually feel very privileged to do what I do because I actually hear the most sensitive parts of people's lives, the most emotionally charged and sensitive parts of people's lives. So it's a great honor and privilege to do what I do. So that's me. I've been doing it for about 11 years. And I'm in private practice here in Westport, Connecticut. I've worked in a psychiatric hospital. I've worked in a group practice, but I've been in my own private practice for quite a while now. And I have to say that a lot of therapists don't get the opportunity to work in a psychiatric hospital. But it is something that I think every therapist should do because it actually rounds out your view of normal people. Right? It really helps you see the whole spectrum of human behavior, and without any sort of judgment. So anyway, so I have that experience, but I love seeing couples. But I have to say, that's some of the most difficult work for a therapist. It's a lot different experience to sit in the room with somebody, an individual who might be challenged by anxiety and depression versus a couple who, for instance, may be married for 20 plus years. That, when people look at the statistics about the success of couples counseling, it's a very low number, but there's a reason for that. The reason is that most couples come in way too late. They come in years after they should have come in. And that's nobody's fault. It's just that life is busy and we all sort of get caught up with other things besides
important things.
Right. Aside from, sort of feeding our relationship, and years go by. And then so when a couple presents to a couples counselor, very often we're having to unravel, 8-10 years of bad communication, bad assumptions, and lots of hurt and pain and resentment. And so it takes a long time to do that, and people give up on it. And that's part of the reason why the success rate is so low.
Do you deal mostly with, obviously with couples and also individuals, but when you're dealing with a couple, do you deal with them together or do you see them each separately?
Well, every therapist does it a little bit differently. For me, it depends. For the most part, you see the couple together. But in some cases, you might sprinkle in some individual sessions. It just may make sense in certain situations. So the answer to that is it depends. But that could get a little tricky too, because there has to be some amount of confidentiality in the individual sessions, but where confidentiality does not sort of stick is if either member of the couple tells the therapist in their individual session something that could get in the way of the couple's therapy being successful, i.e., that somebody's having an affair. So before you do individual sessions, you have to make very clear to the couple that if you tell me a secret like that, either I'm going to work very hard to have you stop having the affair, or to share to come clean with your partner, or we might have to stop working together.
Yeah. And then people are like, well, I don't want to tell them, but if you want to work on your relationship, there has to be that open honesty there to be able to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So let's get into the mental health aspect of things. First, just like on a personal level, do most of your clients, I know this is like a very generic, I don't know if it's like the right type of question to ask, but just like more out of curiosity, do you find that a lot of your clients that come into your office or have like some sort of label, some sort of something that they have like depression, ADHD, even anxiety, something that like those are type of people that you're seeing often? Because I feel like everyone's labeled today with something else, and they're extremely helpful to help us understand the situations. But sometimes people get caught in their labels and they can't really like pull out of it. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I would say the overwhelming majority of individual clients are coming with some sort of label, either that a professional has assigned them or that they've assigned themselves, right? So the overwhelming majority of individuals I see are coming with some sort of label. The couples, on the other hand, it's not the same there. I see plenty of couples where one or both has a mental illness diagnosis, but there's plenty of couples that I see where there is none of that. The other distinguishing factor is while many clients that I see do have mental illness diagnoses, not everybody's on medication.
Yeah.
So, that distinguishes my clients as well. There's plenty of people out there who are depressed and or anxious who are not on medication and don't need to be, right? Talk therapy is sufficient. And my position is that medication is always a last resort.
Yeah.
But I've seen medication turn people's lives around. So I think on one hand, while I say it's the last resort for me, I'm very thankful. I think we should all be grateful that modern medicine has developed the medications that we have at our disposal, because they can turn people's lives around.
100%. Yes. Okay. So how does mental health and mental illnesses, yes, affect marriages, even if they don't come in like specifically with, sometimes they do, but for the ones that don't, either they do or they don't come with their labels, but how in general do mental illnesses affect marriage?
Well, I would say in general, it's better if there is some recognition that one or both have a diagnosis. Because if there's some recognition, right, identification, recognition that one or both have a diagnosis, then the couple can develop a language around that, right? It can be looked at almost objectively, right? Versus emotionally. Let's say somebody deals with somebody's bipolar, or somebody has a personality disorder, or they're challenged by chronic depression. If that's not something that's acknowledged by one or both, then when that person is, steeped in lots of depressed feelings, or they're overly anxious, right? Their body's riddled with anxiety, or they find it hard to regulate their emotions. Maybe they're very reactive, or right. When those things happen to that person, their spouse is not really equipped to receive them in a loving and supportive way, right? It may feel like the spouse is being attacked or misunderstood, or, the spouse may feel very out of control in their relationship and not know how to respond, absorb, right? Their spouse's behavior or communications. So when there is a diagnosis and it's acknowledged by both partners in the marriage, then a loving, compassionate and supportive and objective language can develop, versus people having big emotions about it, like getting upset about at their spouse for how they're being, and it may be something that their spouse has very little control over.
Yeah, like all of a sudden it makes sense. Like that's why she always does that, or he always acts that way, or says these things. It's like, oh, okay, I got to learn more about this illness or this situation, so that way I can know how to respond in this situation and really support my partner.
Yeah, I would say that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Okay. So if, let's say, both partners have a mental illness, especially if it's a very strong one that it takes up every aspect of their lives, not just something like, I think everything affects every aspect of your life, but something that really, really, really gets in the way. What could the couples do to help themselves, help their partners, and really grow together to build their marriage?
Well, I think the answer to that starts with the same answer that I gave you before. It all has to be acknowledged, and the couple has to develop a compassionate, loving, and supportive language and objective language about it. That has to be in place. But in addition to that, I would say a couple where both parties have a significant mental illness diagnosis, they probably need a higher level of care, right? So maybe individual counseling for each party and medication is not enough. Maybe those couples would really benefit from not only individual counseling and medication, but also couples counseling, right? They may even benefit very much from group work, right? I would also say that they want to be involved with therapists that have a good amount of, and this wouldn't be so easy to come by based on where I work and what I know. I think they would need to be dealing with therapists who have a good amount of expertise in the type of mental illness we're talking about and doing couples work. And that, like I said, that might not be so easy to come by. But I think they can't be as passive as a couple where you're talking about a more mild diagnosis, or if just one member of the couple is being challenged. If it's both and it's a serious diagnosis, I think there has to be a decent amount of focus on talk therapy, as well as medication adherence.
Yeah. From my experience just of working with clients, I found that it's most beneficial when these sort of people have like all their, right, you're saying individual therapists and counsel therapists, and like everyone is working together and on the same page. Like here, especially, they need to make sure that if they're seeing one person and then another person and someone else is helping them on that, and sometimes they have an additional help in other areas for different types of things, everyone has to know what their job is, how they're there to support them, so that way they could really have the full power to go and move forward and grow together.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to deal with professionals who are willing to collaborate.
Yeah.
Right. That's very important. And this goes really for any therapy, but mostly for the kind of situation that you're talking about. The clients themselves have to be really open to, to change, right? Because that's what therapy is about. Therapy shouldn't just be a place to go on a weekly basis to vent or to convince a professional that why you're right and your spouse is wrong, right? It should be transformative. And people who are open to really looking at themselves and really understanding what their partner's pain is about, those are the people who benefit from therapy. People who are less willing to look at themselves, people who are less willing to really understand their partner's pain, and people who are less willing to change, then the therapy could almost be a waste of time.
Yeah, I guess that's why I don't take any clients who don't really, really want to go and do this, because there else is no point. Like you said, it's just a waste of time.
Right. But you'd be surprised how many clients, a good percentage of people will commit to therapy, but really have no intentions of doing the work that needs to be done. And good therapists, ethical therapists, will call people out and actually not see them.
Right. And just coming weak, wasting time, wasting your time, wasting their time, and just making money from it. Not getting anything. Creating bigger problems.
Could be.
I'm curious on that point. This is like a little bit off to the side, or a lot off to the side. But what happens if, let's say, a child needs therapy, whether for because of mental illness or any other sort of issue that happened, and he doesn't especially want to go to therapy? As a parent, what would you recommend to, obviously you can't force a kid, like we said, it's not going to do any benefit, but what would you recommend to do?
Now it depends on the age of the kid, right? Because if it's a very young child, then the therapy can be, there are therapists and psychologists who do play therapy, for instance, where they make the therapy more fun and more playful, so it's more, the child is more amenable to going, right? Also, you can, some child psychologists might not just keep it to just individual therapy if it's a young child. So they might do play therapy, but they might also want to include a sibling, right? So that it doesn't feel like I'm going to the doctor, right?
Right.
So that's for smaller kids. For kids, if you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old that really
teenagers
that really don't want to go, lots of times family therapy can help. Right. So if the child doesn't necessarily feel like he or she alone is on the hot seat, but the whole family is going, right? I'm going with my siblings, and we're actually as a unit talking about what's going on between our parents in the household, right? That could help get the kid in. But, sometimes you just have to wait until the kid's ready and willing. Sometimes you can't get a kid in so easily. That's when school psychologists help out a lot, because more often than not, a child will be willing to go see the school counselor before they'll go see somebody on the outside. That feels less, I think, scary for some reason, right? They're comfortable in their school. Right. They might see this person's face. Yeah. So that could sometimes help.
Okay. So back to our mental illness, what do you suggest to the partner, let's say, who doesn't have a diagnosis? How could they go and support their partner that does?
Well,
besides for acknowledgement, that's where it starts with.
Right. So we're assuming that it's acknowledged, right?
We're assuming that it's acknowledged. Yes.
Okay. So I think as long as it's okay with the partner who is challenged by some mental illness, I think attending therapy with their spouse can be very helpful. And I think, education, right? You want to understand what your spouse is going through. I would say a stance of curiosity versus judgment is a good stance for the partner to have. I also think if the partner has their own outlet, they might do their own individual therapy to talk about their own frustrations about the situation, where the partner who's challenged doesn't necessarily have to be there to be exposed to all of that, because that might be hard for them, right? They might take on a lot of guilt if they hear that. But the partner should also have their own safe place to maybe talk about their frustrations. So in general, I would say be educated about what your spouse is going through. develop a curious, empathic stance versus a judgmental or authoritarian one. I would say join in, as long as it's okay with your spouse, join in their therapy to learn more from their therapist, and to do your own therapy, to get your own support.
Yeah, I like that one a lot, to do your own therapy, get your own support, because sometimes you get like stuck in it. We're so busy trying to help the other person, and we're like we said, life is going on and it's not as important, or we seem like it's not as important. And it just really is. Yeah. So that's really, really good. You've got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Okay. Now, I know from my experience of working with other people and just from being things that being around here in this world, that people with mental illnesses get into a lot more challenges just because it's much harder. So a lot of times the relationship is much more rocky, goes through much more things, because they have to deal with their own selves on a daily basis, dealing with all those challenges. And there's also the challenges in the marriage, especially if both of them have a diagnosis. So sometimes it feels like maybe this isn't working out, but then at the same time, you want to make it work out. You love the other person and things, but it's so hard and you don't know. And then you need to take a break, and then you come back and it just gets into like a whole big mess. What could a person do if they're in a tough situation like that to really believe in the relationship and to go and make it work?
Well, I think a good couples counselor can help with that, right? A good couples counselor can sort of help the couple pull apart what's actually happening, what's not going right in their marriage, right? Once you establish what's not going right, and there may be some agreement between the two of them about what's going wrong and what's going right, and there may be disagreement about what's going wrong. Right. An interesting thing about couples therapy is very often people get surprised by what they hear from their spouse once they get into therapy, because people hold back a lot of things, right? And the therapy room can feel like a very safe place to let some things out. And also a good couples counselor will ask the right questions so that things that haven't come out before, that need to come out. So people get surprised by what they sometimes hear in their therapy. But back to what I was saying, a good couples counselor will pull apart what's not working for each person, what's not working for the couple, and then we look at the why, right? We try and figure out who's doing what that isn't working for the other person, right? What's sort of the kernel? What's the root of the problem? And that could take a long time to figure out. It may not be a simple answer. It may be a complicated answer. It may have to do with family of origin issues. There are different kinds of therapies, right? There are different kinds of strategies to use. I choose from a lot of different things, depending on the couple that's presenting to me or the individual that's presenting to me. But something that is pretty much always used is looking at family of origin issues, because how you grew up, where you came from, what you were exposed to early in life has everything to do with who you are as an adult, who you are as, an intimate partner, who you are as a friend, who you are as a sibling, who you are as a parent, right?
Yeah, so, it literally affects everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So we look at that too. Why is it that maybe somebody is given towards this kind of behavior and that doesn't work so well in the marriage? But let's understand why it is. And is that something that we can shift on, right? And if we can shift on it, does it make sense that the couple will benefit? Like there'll be some improvement in the couple's relationship. And see, that's why when couples therapy is working, it's so wonderful, because what gets developed is an appreciation, an understanding, a respect for what the other person's dealing with and why, versus some sort of judgment about the person. It it causes people to step away from their own pain and to actually be focused on the other person's pain. And isn't that what we all need? Don't we all need to be seen and heard? Wouldn't there be a lot less conflict in our lives, in this world, in politics, on the globe, if other people weren't just able to articulate their own pain, but were able to really focus in on the other's pain? That's like the big kahuna. That's like what you want to get to. That's
Totally.
how problems.
Oh yes.
That's how problems get solved.
So I'm like in total agreement of that. We all just like basic human nature want to be seen, want to be heard, want to be understood, want to feel connected. So maybe do you have a tip or something someone could do? Yes, go to therapy. We heard that loud and clear, especially if you've got a mental illness. Even if you don't, if you have any issues, go before it's too late. But what could someone do, start applying right now in their relationship, so that way they could, either on the topic of helping their partner really feel understood, or if you think that there's something else more important, then you could go and share that.
If we're talking about a couple who's having, we're talking generically now.
Very
right?
generic here.
About, I would say, if you can, try and identify the pattern, right? The pattern of communication that's causing the problem, right? Causing this couple to trip up. So for instance, very often you'll see a dynamic like, a partner will nag or keep bringing up a certain topic, right? And their partner's reaction will be to sort of detach and step back, right? It's a very common dynamic we see in couples. And, if a couple can see that, if they could see that that's what's happening and look at it objectively and step back from it and be able to talk about it, that's like a first step in to some real progress. So this is the thing. We all get caught up in these processes like, I'm going to keep asking the same question because I need to get an answer on this, or I need to get my spouse to hear me, to really understand me on this. And I don't think they do. So I keep bringing it up, but they never respond the way I want, but I keep doing it, right? When you keep doing the same thing, right, and you're not getting the result you want, then to keep doing it is not a solution. It's actually, there's a term for it, right? It's called an ironic process, where a person thinks they're making the issue better. They think they're resolving the issue. Well, if I keep asking, maybe they'll answer me, right? But they're actually making it worse, because the more you ask the same question, the more my partner's going to detach. And you know what? The more my partner detaches, the more I'm going to keep trying to ask, right? The partner also thinks they're making the situation better. Well, if I just detach and I just avoid her and ignore her, maybe she'll be quiet. No, the more you avoid her, the less quiet she's going to be. So when couples can see that they have sort of a pattern of communication that doesn't resolve anything, then it's good to look at it. It's good if they could say to themselves, I find that when I get upset, when you do this every Thursday night, right? I don't come to you and talk about it. I bottle it up, I get pissed off, and the next day I start nagging you and poking you. And then you get really upset, and then we never talk about what originally bothered me. I think we've been doing this for years, where I get mad, I don't say anything, and then I just poke you and you get mad at me, and then we just don't talk for a few days, right? I'm making that up, but that's a pretty common pattern, right? If a couple can recognize that they have some patterns between them that don't work so well, if they can start talking about it, they can start identifying it, and even if they've identified it, come up with some sort of word or symbol or sign, just between the two of them, right? So when they see themselves launching into it again, one or both can say, wait, right? This is it. This is our pattern. This is what we do. This doesn't work. Let's talk about what's really going on.
Yeah.
That's really healthy stuff.
Yeah. That's like real deep work and really, really, really important. Like you said, especially like the part, like you keep on trying to do what you've always been doing and you think you're putting in all the energy and you think you're putting in all the effort and it's making you just more frustrated and it's not getting you anywhere. And it's like, okay, what
people do that for years.
Yeah.
People do that for years.
Yeah. My marriage is okay. It's fine. Like we have some things to work out, but you're just redoing the same things over again. So yeah, if you guys would do that, you are going to change a lot in your marriage. Okay. So for our final question, one that I ask anyone is, how would you describe an extraordinary relationship without using love, trust, and understanding?
I think, and I mentioned this before. I think people, and this goes for any relationship, not just a marriage. People who can suspend their own pain and really hear what the other's pain is are people who generally have healthy relationships. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't prioritize your own needs, right? Everybody's got to be focused on their own needs too. But people who can be focused on their own needs, but can also be very focused on the person that they're in a relationship with, that person's needs, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
And if you read any of the books on any of the Zen books, lots of Eastern philosophy, a lot of it is about sort of spending your own stuff, your own agenda, and being involved with the other. Because that's sort of a self-feeding process. The more you can do that, the more you get the person that you're in the relationship with to be focused on you. And then
I think also that if it's done right and in a healthy way, then it feeds yourself also.
Right.
You get energized from being able to go and be there with another person. Yeah.
Right. And people who are filled up individually are the best partners in a relationship. So if you're doing that for each other, what's better?
Totally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. This was amazing. I really appreciate you coming on here today.
No problem. I really enjoyed it.
That's all for this episode of the Life Fix University podcast, but I have a huge favor to ask of you that will not only support the show, but will also help the people you love most. We are striving for 1 million downloads by the end of 2025, and we can't do this without your help. If you love this episode, please share it with 2 of your family and friends so they too can rewire their brains to have an extraordinary marriage. It was awesome spending time with you, and I'll see you on the next episode.